Hey, good morning, people. My name is Dr. George Sparks, and this is Biblical Archaeology from the Ground Down, sponsored by Bible Interact. And with today's topic, you're going to think like, how is this biblical archaeology? Well, it's not today, but this is going to be a lot of fun. I got with me today Mr. Thomas Winder, and if you've seen our past videos, you know that this man can get himself into situations and from some reason come out of it. For instance, we talked about Mr. Winder going to the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And he told me this like 15 years ago. He went in and somehow got permission. And he told me he was actually laying down in the sarcophagus of Khufu, which is in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid. I thought that kind of stuff could get you in lots of trouble. And then he shows me a picture. And we had that picture and we actually had it on one of our episodes. But today, once again, not as an archaeologist, but this time as a evangelist in his early years, where he might have still had some dark hair. We're going to welcome Mr. Thomas Winder and Mr. Thomas Winder's big adventure.
Well,
Welcome, Thomas.
good morning, George. Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're going to have to set us up for this one because it's going to take a little bit to set the background because I looked this up and it is either on Wikipedia or YouTube. So it can be found. All right. You can get more information if you would like.
Well, good morning again, and some of my friends would be sort of surprised at what I do. They would say, "Ah, you must be making that stuff up," but really, I'm not making anything up. Before I became the Holy Land Research Institute and moved in with the Syrian Druze up on Mount Hermon, which is what my ministry is all about today. 20 or 30 years ago, I was doing missionary work independently, of course. Most times you think of a missionary as someone that gets basically supported by their church or their denomination. They're sent to some country where there's a house to live in and probably a church to work on or to minister out of. They get a salary from the church. They get taken care of, even though they're in some foreign country somewhere. Well, then there's independent missionaries like myself without any support from a denomination or a church that go out on their own to try to reach people that are the unreached. There still are people in the world that have never heard about Jesus. So this is what I was doing some 20 or 30 years ago. And I went to the ends of the world in a couple different places, South America and Mexico. And one day, a friend of mine came to me and said, "Look what's in this book of the Keys of Enoch. It's a religious book." And this friend who was living in Mexico at the time, down in Palenque, he says, "I have a friend in the military, Mexican military. He's a captain, and he's done work in the Mazatec lands, which are the central mountains of Mexico at the very top above Oaxaca, above Huautla. In fact, they're so removed and so isolated that even the Mexican government doesn't get there to tax them or to do anything. They are that isolated from society. In fact, it was a 25-mile hike from the last village just to get to where the natives of the Mazatakis still lived on top of the mountain. So Manuel Oca, that's his name, and myself, and I took two other Americans with me, and we all met in Oaxaca. Then we took a bus up to Huautla, and then we hitched on a pickup truck into the jungle, and then we walked 25 miles to get to the village on top of the mountain where these Mazatec Indians lived. And there, from the top of the mountain, George, you can actually see to the west. You get to see the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, and from the east, you get to see the Pacific Ocean. It's a remarkable place, and it's got a lot of the deepest caves in the world up there. So you have Spirilankas, the guys that go down into caves. They like to go up there and explore because they found many interesting things in those caves. But what we were doing is we were bringing the Bible. We were bringing, the story of the gospel and the good news that that God had come to earth as Messiah to give His life to forgive us all and to bring us into the kingdom of heaven. And so that was our mission. Well, we got all the way in without any problems until we got to the very last outpost on top of Cerro Rabon, where the people there were living on a farm, growing corn and beans as their substance. Living in basically what we would refer to as chicken coops. And there's 4 of us, and there's about a dozen Mazatakis living on this farm. And we had the interpreter with us, the Mexican captain from the military who spoke Mazateci. We also had the medicine man of the local tribe with us. And wow, he was an old man, but he could outrun us. He could outmaneuver us on those mountains. It's amazing. Great story. I have incredible pictures of this. Of course, the old film camera style pictures that had to be developed in those days. Nothing like today's technology. But so we get there, and it's getting close to nightfall. We had 2 donkeys with us to carry our supplies because it was quite the hike. 25 miles in the jungle in central Mexico is not easy. So we get there mid-afternoon to the top of Cerro Rabon where this farm is. And these people are, they're excited to see strangers. Who are these crazy white people showing up? So they were intrigued, and we made friends immediately. We had some small gifts to give out, and they said, okay, well, you're going to have to sleep over here in one of our chicken coops because that's all we have available. And of course, we said, oh no, we'll sleep out here under the stars. We're going to sleep out here, and be perfectly fine. And the Indian said, oh no, you're not. You can't sleep outside because of Chaknya. We said, well, what the heck is Chaknya? So they described this Bigfoot creature, and not just one, but many of them. There must have been a family of these Chaknya Bigfoot type creatures that lived there. And they were so scared for us that they made sure that our donkeys were tied up next to us. They brought some of their birds and some of their farm animals and also tied them up right next to us out in this very small open area so that we would be safe from getting either killed or raped by the Chaknya. And they had all these incredible stories. The next day, we slept just fine. The next day, we got up, we ate our breakfast, and we hiked to the top of the mountain. And believe me, George, we saw the footprints, we saw the scat, we saw what the Chaknya was eating because they could break off the top of some of those palm type trees and eat the berries. So we saw the very evidence that these creatures were real. And of course, the Indians, the Mazatecis, couldn't stop talking about the Choctaw because they literally have a symbiotic relationship with these big creatures. So when we got back down from the mountain that day, we had a campfire, we're having dinner, and these Indians told us all these remarkable stories, not just how big and hairy that these Choctaw were, but they had pets amongst them, like the big lions of the mountains that weigh a couple 100 pounds. They were the Choctaw's pets that followed them around. There were males and females both, and they literally, now they didn't do it when we were there, but the Indians told us that when they would have campfires like the one that we would had just built that night, that the Choctaw would come out of the forest and walk around the campfire and kind of dance around with the native Indians, the Mazatakis. And so they weren't particularly scared of them, but they were scared for us because we were from the outside world and didn't know how to behave ourselves around these creatures. So that's why they tied up the animals next to us so that we wouldn't get taken away by the Choctaw.
That's all right. Let me just so people have a reference. Mazatec, I looked it up on Wikipedia. They actually are a people in Mexico, and it's spelled Mazatec. Now it could also end in an A, Mazatec. So there's a little variations. That's in Wikipedia. Now you can also go to YouTube, and Thomas talks about the Choctaw, and like also here in the United States, if you're up in, let's say, Ohio, we say Bigfoot. But if you're somewhere further to the maybe to the east or the west of the United States, then they use different names like Sasquatch. But we know it's the same creature. So when Thomas talks about this Choctaw, there's another name that comes up, and it's on YouTube. It's called El Sasamita or Sasamiti. So El meaning da, E-L, and then the word Sasamita. Simite, Sasamita or Sasamiti, either one. So those are your references, folks. So it's actually out there, and has, you could say, a reference, whether you want to go to Wikipedia or to YouTube. So there you go. Thomas, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to give a background so people could actually look it up and see.
Well, it was a wild trip. We stayed on Cerro Rabon for 3 days with the Mazatakis that are up there, hearing their stories. They have, of course, their traditions and their own culture and their own language. And so we had to have the interpreter. They did things like they shot a marta out of a tree one day to eat it. Of course, they'll eat anything that moves, I think, for their sustenance, of course. A marta is something like the cross between a dog and a monkey. We've never seen one. I don't even know if we have them in our zoos. But when they shot this little animal with a long tail, they offered us to drink the blood out of this animal because nothing goes to waste, of course. When you out in the woods like that, you don't let anything go to waste. So they were literally sucking the blood right out of this animal, and then we of course refused to do that, and then they took and skinned the animal, and they were going to make a toy for their children out of this stuffed marta. That was something that stuck in my mind. The other thing was the stories of the Choctaw. We had to do things like peel corn husk and get corn collected to feed our donkeys because they had to carry our stuff back with us. We left these people. I carved two crosses. I made two crosses and put our names on them. And there is no doubt in my mind that those two crosses are still hanging in their house on Cerro Rabon down above Huautla and Oaxaca in the central mountains of Mexico. I'm sure of it to this day. If we went there, we would find those two crosses with our names engraved on the crosses. And we did that. We carved them as gifts for these people so they would remember us and also remember the stories of Jesus that we brought to them. Never heard anything back. I haven't talked to Manuel Oca after that. He had some tragedies in his life, lost his wife and a child in a car accident, very tragic stuff. And I have not been back down to Palenque since to see if he's ever gone back to follow up. That would be a good thing to do one day.
Now, other people have gone there too. And did you tell me before that the like, people go up there like treasure hunting because there's rumors of like treasure in the mountain, kind of like
Montezuma's gold was reported to be in those mountains, and
okay.
people have tried to go look for it. Unfortunately, they didn't come out alive, and there's so many cave openings that these people can literally kill you and just throw you in a hole, and you'll be gone. No one will ever find you again. In fact, on our trip, there was four of us that went in, and we came out. We hiked out of the mountain, and it happened to be the day of it was before Easter, and these Indians had some sort of parade going on in the middle of their village, and we walked out of the jungle right into their parade, which broke up their party. The men ran off. We thought, well, what's going on? All the men all of a sudden disappeared. And within a couple minutes, they came back fully armed with rifles and guns, and they were going to kill us because we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're not supposed to be there. At this moment, we were hitchhiking back to town, back to Huautla, so we did not have the medicine man with us, and we did not have the captain of the military with us. So we were on our own. But, God is good. And fortunately for us, I had made friends with this little tiny Mazatec guy the first night we had arrived, and he was dressed in all white cotton, like the traditional clothing of the Mazatecs. And I could speak Spanish pretty well in those days. And he could speak Spanish. I didn't know who he was, but I made friends with him. It turned out that he was one of the main chiefs of the tribe, and he was leading this procession, this parade, the day that we came out of the woods. And with the guns pointing at us, this little Mazatec Indian guy walks out in front of us all and walks up to me and gives me a big hug like we were old friends from the old days. And he said, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you again. I'm glad that you guys made it out of the woods. And he turned to the posse with all the guns, and he said, you guys don't have to worry about these men. They're here. They're our friends, and they love us. And you can put the guns down, and we can all enjoy each other. Whoa! The guns went down. The men of the village came and shook our hands. And if it wasn't for that little tiny Mazatec guy that I had made friends with on the first day in, who knows if we'd ever come out of there alive.
That's quite the adventure just to go up and, I shouldn't say just to go up and preach the gospel, but that's pretty extreme, going up there. And then so when you take the gospel to a group of Mazatec, did they speak Spanish or what did they speak?
Well, no, they speak their own language of Mazatec language. It sounds like an Oriental language, honestly.
Mhm. Then
And we had the Mexican captain from the military who spoke
mm,
Mazatec, and of course we spoke Spanish. So we would speak Spanish to him, and he would interpret to the Mazatec Indians. Very similar to the other trips I've taken down to Panama to the end of the road. Man, I've been to the end of the world a number of times trying to reach people that are unreached. And I
right.
guess I guess that was a habit I was getting into then, and the Lord has used me in the same way. He's still using me in the same way to this day with the Syrian Druze on Mount Hermon. I'm literally the only outsider that's ever been allowed to live in Majd al-Sham since the Ottoman Empire, for crying out loud, before World War One. So it's just something that the Lord has used me to do. I think it's remarkable. I've got great stories to tell, and sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're a little dramatic, but I'm
Right.
still alive, and I'm still preaching the gospel, and I'm still doing my best to get the word out before it's
Yeah,
too late.
taking the that's very interesting. It kind of reminds me years ago, um, a man, his name is Herb Stearns. He was from Massachusetts, and he told me about. He said, "Do you know?" Now he's Jewish, and he says, "Do you know about?" Now I don't know if this is completely factual. He said the first Bible completely printed, or the first colonial Bible first printed. All right, was printed in the first American Bible. Maybe that's it. As first printed in America was uh, for the Algonquin Indians. It's called the Algonquin Indians, and the minister was John Eliot. And John Eliot used the English alphabet to form words that were the Algonquin, and from that he wrote the Algonquin Bible. One now, a Bible leaf is just a page. And I used to have several pages of the Algonquin Bible. I still got one now, but it's in storage, or I could let me see real quick here. No, wait a second. That's it right there. Make sure it's right side up. Can you see that?
Hey, look at that.
That's the Algonquin one page. And I think it's like $1,000. I'm not bragging about the $1,000. I'm just saying how rare it is. And it's from the Algonquin Bible that was written by John Eliot for the Algonquin Indians. And here's, I can see all the history behind it right here. So I had the whole thing completely framed. And it just so happens that I just had it here. That's odd. But it's about a missionary that actually went to a tribe. Who's ever heard of Algonquin? And from that, he was their missionary, and he developed a language for them, not spoken, but he has to take their spoken language and use an alphabet to make it a written language to make sense. And for that written language, he wrote the Algonquin Bible, and they're extremely, extremely rare. So, kind of
Wow.
in a way, what you did, you went to a very out of the way people group, unknown people group, and you minister to them in language that basically is their own. And I just want to say to people, it's been done before, and I just showed you proof of it. All right. And his name was John Eliot. Matter of fact, he used to preach to the Algonquin Indians uh, from like a hill. And now that hill is in the middle of a cemetery, but it has a plaque, a big bronze plaque describing John Eliot and what he did at that very spot some almost 300 years ago, I believe. All right. Um, just as another reference, and this was going to be like a biblical scenario, similar to, we talked about this earlier, the Sasamita, or what you would refer to as the Choctaw. Um, in the legend of the Sesamita, the El Sesamita from Central America and Mexico, I looked it up. They also had a history of capturing humans, people, and having relations with the women. And from that, sounds familiar? And from that, having offspring that were very unique. And of course, according to the legend, I'll just call it a legend or whatever, um, they still exist. They still populate amongst themselves. And it sounds like what's the Rephaim? I'm going to say it talks about how the giants came down or the gods came down and had relations with women in the Bible. And they become the sons of God, something like that. Remember how that went? And you talked about that in when you were up in Israel. So you know what? We do have similarities in our biblical narrative, if you will, and also here in the United States that of somebody ministering to a distant people group, a small, unique, have their own language, and from that developed a written language form that so that they could be ministered to and have their own Bible. It's extremely rare, but I just showed you evidence of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought maybe I just throw that in. So to add, some like what you're saying is not necessarily have to be that far out. Things do happen.
Well, and I don't know if there's Bibles printed yet in the Mazatec language. They were quite uneducated. I'm not sure if anyone knew how to read or if their language was ever actually written down. I'm unaware of any books in the Mazatec language and especially Bibles. If there had been, I would imagine we would have tried real hard to get Bibles in their own language to take with us, but we couldn't find such a thing. So I don't know if there is such a thing even to this day.
Right.
Now, where I am now, of course, on the slopes of Mount Hermon in the Golan Heights, the people speak Arabic, so I pass out Bibles in Arabic like candy up there, and being the only outsider, the only missionary, the only Christian in their midst. It's just another example of what people can do on their own if they're really serious about spreading the word of God and knowing who Jesus really is.
Um, and that's a good point. For instance, I just mentioned the man John Elliott. He did that on his own. Uh, so it's very unique, but it can be done.
It can be
And
done. It's tough to get funds together
yeah, I know it is.
because as an independent missionary, it's up to me to talk to people like you to get the word out on the Holy Land Research Institute, which is a 501c3, nonprofit corporation here in America and in Israel. And so that's what I have to do when I'm here in the United States. I'm running around speaking in churches and getting everywhere from Florida to California, even in Hawaii. I've been invited many times to speak, and that's how I get the funding to be able to do these missionary trips to people that have never heard about the gospel.
Right. So I invite people to actually support your ministry, and even though it might be one or just a handful of people going up to northern Israel to minister and be missionaries in that direction, it's still worthwhile because you never know. You never
Well,
know how things will unravel.
well, that's right. And right now there's a war going on in Israel, and the
Right.
supply chains have really come to a halt. The people up in the Golan Heights are basically running out of supplies. The work has come to a grinding halt. There's literally nothing going on except for preparations in case they get bombed. They're like sitting ducks up there, right on the Syrian border and the Lebanon border, kind of like being in the middle of a donut, praying for the best. I pray every day for these people, the Druze, by the way, the Syrian Druze in the Golan Heights, because they really are like sitting ducks. They're not armed. They don't have an army. They don't have a police force. They don't have anything other than the Israeli army to protect them. And of course, the Israeli army right now is spread thin. Boy, they're fighting a war in the West Bank as well as the Gaza Strip and on the Lebanon border right now as things are firing up. So yeah, they need our help. They need our prayers. They need our support. They need all the help we can give them.
So we're gonna have to wrap this up. So once again, this is Mr. Thomas Winder. These were his past evangelical trips that we talked about today. And he was in Mexico and he was missionary to the Mazatec. And what was unique about it, when he told me this adventure some 15 plus years ago, I think we were at Tel El Hammam in Jordan, staying at the Moving Pick.
Yeah, that's right. And it was New Year's Eve. And even I will never forget that night because there were decorations on the table and a couple of candles, and they caught fire right in the middle of my storytelling, and we were all so involved in the story that we just kind of let the fire burn for a minute before we took our water and put it out.
Well, it's been, like I said, 15 years, and I still remember that event, and we had such a great time that I thought I'd take 30 minutes or so of a program and share it with the listening audience. And I really hope everybody enjoyed it. I know I did. It was Thomas Winder's event, Thomas Winder's big adventure to the Mazatec, and also that you did you ever get to see the Choctaw, or did you hear the Choctaw, or just hear
No,
about
we
them?
never heard them. We never saw them, but we saw
Mhm.
plenty of footprints, all kinds of scat, and all kinds of evidence what food they were eating. So I know they exist. We literally saw the evidence other than a personal upfront introduction.
Well, I wonder if the Choctaw like white meat or dark meat, because you're definitely the white meat. You know.
Yeah,
With that, I'm going to
yeah.
have to let you go, Thomas. Thanks so much for sharing your adventures with us. And I had a great time once again.
Well, next time we might talk about me going down to the Kuna Indians in Panama. That's another great adventure.
Ooh. All right, let's do that. All right, thanks.
Sure.
Don't go away. I just got to sign off. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And you heard, what was the name of your organization again? It
The
is
Holy Land Research Institute.
Holy Land Research Institute. Look it up and support him, people. Way up there all by himself in northern Israel. Thanks for your time, Thomas.
Thank you.